What's up guys, it's Rowan here from Art of Smart TV, and today I'm sitting down and chatting with Oliver. Now Oliver scored a Band 6 in HSC Business Studies and is currently going to be studying a Bachelor of Economics at ANU. And in today's video we're going to dive in and we're going to look at Oliver's approach in how to score a Band 6 in HSC Business Studies. So welcome Oliver.
Hi, how you going?
I'm well. Now, Business Studies, was it a subject you enjoyed?
No. I enjoyed some aspects of some topics, and I liked the whole idea of business and, you know, some of the things beyond the course, but I didn't really enjoy a lot of the parts of business.
So you sort of picked a course, it sounds like, in year 10 because business sounded cool and, you know, broadly.
I picked it because, you know, it just sounds like, oh, well, I should probably do this. You know, like I'm more or less interested in this, let's do it. So that's what I did.
Okay, and then you got in and discovered, well, okay, it wasn't quite what you expected. Now, I think what's interesting is, despite the fact that it maybe was a bit of a grind at times, you know, you did exceptionally well, which is great. What I'd love to do is unpack that, because I think there are probably a lot of students that are in exactly the same boat. They picked it thinking it was going to be one thing and get in and then, you know, discover, oh, there's all this maths, you know, in terms of there's this accounting stuff we need to be looking at here. You know, that's I didn't realize that. Or maybe, hey, all I wanted to do was the finance stuff and I'm stuck with all this HR and marketing, which, you know, may have been, So I guess you start year 12, you know, how did you build your foundation initially in business?
With most of my subjects, actually not with most of my subjects, with economics and business, I really liked to take notes, pen and paper, just wish I did it in a binder, but just in a, you know, in a book, just taking notes throughout the year, looking at the textbook, because business is really just to open the textbook and look at it kind of subject. So just doing that, looking at the textbook and being able to recognize where the textbook has faults, I think is pretty important for business, for taking notes. Because I find business textbooks have a very interesting way of doing things. And I think in terms of being able to answer HSC questions and just exam questions, the textbook isn't always that helpful. So being able to cross-reference the textbook with your own notes and with your own knowledge, I think is very important.
So how did you start to identify the limitations of a textbook? Like, what was that process like? Because it sounds like that's quite important in building your knowledge foundation for business studies.
So I think being able to recognize that kind of comes from answering questions and getting them wrong. So doing mistakes and being able to recognize, oh crap, I actually don't really know this. Like, that is where you can go, wait, the textbook doesn't really tell me how to do this and I've really got to do this myself, which is quite annoying, you know, not being, you know, handheld with a textbook. And I guess, you know, there's a message in that, but it's pretty annoying. So, you know, getting through your practice exams and being able to look at questions and go, oh, gee, I don't know that.
So were you doing those questions fairly regularly then? So was it something that you were doing, I don't know, multis and shorts and so forth, and maybe even some extended responses more consistently so that you were getting that feedback loop on, I'm getting that wrong?
So I definitely got help from Art of Smart in that regard, with my one-on-one tutor, Julian. So he went through a lot of past papers with me, and, you know, every second page or something there's a question where I'm like, I don't know, you know, like I don't really know. Like I know the theory, I know what the thing is, like I know what the marketing strategy is, but I don't actually know how to apply it in the question. And I find with business, that's a lot of the problem, is knowing what something is. Like, you know the definition, you know what it is, you know how it works, but you don't know maybe how it applies in terms of whatever the question's asking. And I found that a pretty big problem.
So there's a gap almost. There's like the theoretical, like getting that, and that I think is a little bit of a memory game from my sense, right? And then there's this application piece, and it seems like for a lot of students, potentially that gets left too close to an assessment, right? Whereby, you know, you may be doing the past papers, you know, the week before, and all of a sudden you're getting stuff wrong, and you're like, oh, and then you go in and do that. So it sounds like your approach was actually to bring that a lot earlier in the journey.
Definitely. So doing that stuff a lot earlier, and it's definitely a lot of trial and error, with business, and a lot of memory and a lot of just grinding with notes, just writing down everything and trying to memorize everything, using your highlighters and making everything more organized. I think that's pretty much the key.
So then just a strategy that's emerged in here is you've got step one here is you start building your notes. It's that foundation of memory. You're doing that, you're highlighting, you're using the textbook, you're sort of using class, teachers, support, etc. to build it. Then you're integrating past exam, and there's a huge amount of papers available, which makes it easier to prep for. So there should be no excuses. It's not a new syllabus. So you're integrating and doing, was it a weekly or a fortnightly basis, you would say, doing some practice questions and applying?
I didn't really enjoy doing it, which, no one really does, but having a push from an external source, whether that's your parents or your teacher or, tutoring, that was pretty helpful. So maybe I'd say kind of fortnightly, like just doing questions, not doing like a whole paper in one sitting because that's just a real drag, but just, doing what you can, based on whatever level your motivation's at.
And I'm assuming those questions were related to the topics that you would just been unpacking, is that right? So you were you'd learn something, you'd build some notes on it, right? You'd then do some practice questions, then get a feedback loop. So were you self-marking with Julian, your tutor marking? Like how were you, because you need to identify you're making a mistake, and that can often be tricky. How did you identify, oh yeah, bummer, this is a mistake, I need to go and fix some of my foundation?
I'd say the first step is self-evaluation. So you look at it and go, that's really not a satisfactory answer. That's really not good. And then, or your tutor, or your parent, or your teacher. And then and the last one is the marker. And I, didn't do so well on my first and, on my first and kind of pretty much the second assessment. So that was a bit of a, that helped as well.
Because you were getting that feedback and taking it to go, okay, like how do I take this and improve?
Yeah, exactly.
So then that sort of is laying this foundation, and you're sort of playing that out across the year. I know you've also got some of the extended responses, whether or not that's like the report that you're doing or otherwise. What advice or tips would you have for students who maybe are struggling with the extended response component of business studies, and just based on what you did?
Yeah, so that's pretty tricky. First of all, I'd say that the majority of the year and the majority of your time in business studies, I'd say 70% is theory, like 70% is understanding the content, and then the last 30% is just being able to apply it. And that's really annoying, that 30% being able to apply the knowledge that, you've been drilled or, you've been learning it and whatever. So I think for writing extended responses, being able to apply whatever knowledge you've been taught and whatever knowledge you've retained in your head, a lot of it's practice, and a lot of it is rereading your notes and memorizing what you know. I found that the biggest problem for me was being succinct and being able to link things back to the question and back to just the purpose of business, which is just, what does it actually do for the business, right? So being able, just at the end of each paragraph, at the end of each point that I'm trying to make, at the end of each example, instead of just going, oh, okay, you do this and you make sales and, money. You gotta go a step further than that, and you've got to go, okay, I did this, like I used this marketing strategy, which did this, which, maybe that's, more people from this target market purchasing a product or whatever, and then that creates more profit for the business, which, leads to achieve the business goals. And being able to just wrap things up neatly in business, that was really important to getting more marks, because at least in my experience, that's how they hand out a lot of marks, is just how neatly you wrap things up and how neatly you package things when you're sending it to them, really.
And so then were you writing a fair bit of practice responses throughout the year? What did that sort of look like in terms of your practice?
Yeah. So with because a lot of the learning was online, you can kind of rewrite it, and there's at-home assessments that you hand in, like the business report. If your school does that, you do get to look at it and redo it and perfect it, or try to perfect it. And obviously the in-school ones, the ones where you just sit down and have to write an essay, that's really hard, and that's just practice. And that practice just comes from doing it at home.
And so you weren't memorizing responses, you were memorizing the content.
Yes.
Right, getting really solid in that, and then getting some, like you were doing with your shorts and your multis integrated, you were getting some practice questions from prior papers. Yeah. Setting some time conditions, is that what you were doing?
So I was never a fan of time conditions, but doing it in time conditions helped, because it's the hard stuff. Like, I don't want to do it in time condition. It's annoying and it's hard and I don't like it, but doing it helps, and doing it is what gets you more marks. It's just doing the stuff you don't want to do and the annoying, dreadful stuff.
And just two sort of final questions. One is, what did you do then in the lead up to your trials or HSC for prep?
Similar to what I did with economics, just reading through my notes and summarizing them into just topics, and one topic may have two or three pages. Topic 2 or the next chapter or whatever would have more or less or whatever. So just compiling a good summary of notes, which is a mix between your notes, your knowledge, the textbook, and then resources that you can find online. So I found that using online resources and resources given to me by ArtSmart, just cross-referencing those with my stuff was very helpful to having a really good foundation and a really solid understanding of the course. And then obviously the last part is just learning how to apply that. So that was where the real tricky stuff came in for preparing for HSC and trials. It's just translating what you know and your knowledge into practice, which is just past papers, doing questions, especially doing the questions that you don't really know how to answer in a succinct or in a really structural way, and then just doing those, and whenever you come across them, and doing past papers.
Do you remember how many past papers you reckon you would have done at all?
I had like a set amount that I wanted to do, and that was like one a week, at least one a week, and then when you're closer, you do 2 or 3. Obviously, well, not obviously, but I didn't do it. I didn't do enough. I should have done that, and I got a bit lazy, and I didn't really do exactly what I was supposed to do. But definitely having a push from other people, and thinking to yourself, oh, I'm really not going to do that well if I don't actually put some work into it, and just putting the work in, and trying to do at least one a week. That's what I did.
Great. And so it also sounds like within that, it's maybe one a week, it's a good cadence. And secondly, particularly pay attention to questions that you are struggling with, like critically, right? Like, rather than avoid them. Because I do think you're right. I mean, we do this in life, it's hard, I don't want to do it, right? Yeah. Sort of counterintuitive, but that's the pathway we need to take.
So just not avoiding the questions that are theoretically hard, like, oh crap, I don't know the theory. And definitely not avoiding the ones that I know how to do. Like, I know the theory behind it, I know what they're talking about, but I don't really know how to write it down. Like, I don't really know how to write it down in a way that's neat, in a way that actually makes sense, especially not avoiding those ones. Because those are the ones where it's marks that you shouldn't be losing, because you know it, right? And yeah, you shouldn't lose those marks, and you got to practice to not lose those marks.
And then final question, what do you wish you did differently reflecting on your business studies journey?
I didn't actually finish the course in terms of writing notes. So business can be quite a dredge, right? It can be it's not always the most interesting. And I let that get the better of me, and I just skipped like entire bits, I skipped entire little like syllabus dot points and all that, and I got fairly lucky in the HSC by not getting a lot of those questions that were relevant to the things that I kind of just skipped and didn't really put much work into at all. But again, I still lost marks because I didn't follow through, and I didn't complete the stuff that I should have done just because it was the sack, and just because it was hard to do, I skipped some stuff. So I wish I'd just put a little bit more work in and really tried to have a solid theoretical understanding of everything rather than just a lot in this, kind of, a bit in this, and then pretty good in the rest. You got to have at least good for all of it, you know what I mean?